right over here. So go ahead and start writing your questions down, and we'll get this show on the road pretty soon. Once again, welcome to the Oregon Country Fair Board of Directors Candidates Forum. Town Hall meeting. We're going to get this rolling here in just a second, and so please take a seat, get whatever beverage you need, fill out any kind of questions you want, either bring them up here or put them in the box.
The Oregon Country Fair is the unique work of many heads, hands, and hearts dreaming and collaborating and celebrating, and that's really why we're here tonight. We're here to listen with open hearts and open minds. So the two other points, there's one more forum after this. So if your particular question does not get answered or does not get answered fully enough tonight, keep track of that. The next forum is on October 6th here at 5 p.m. Also, any one of these people would love to hear from you, and you can get their contact information and get a hold of them and ask your question. They will just have 90 seconds to answer questions, and that's not much time. So we do have two moderators tonight. They are neutral, and I'm going to turn this over to them, and they'll explain the rules of the road, and then we'll get going. So thank you again very much. Andy Goldfinger and Todd Buchholz.
Close enough.
Thank you.
Okay, the format for tonight is going to be pretty simple. Each of the candidates is going to get 2 minutes to do an opening statement. We have a timekeeper that's going to flash signs for when they have 15 seconds and when their time is up. Once they've all done their opening statements, then we've separated them into odds and evens because we have so many candidates that we're going to have one group answer one question and then another group will answer another question. So we'll actually be dealing 2 questions out of the bin each time through. And then we'll be keeping track of who answers first so that we'll rotate through fairly. Then once they get to their question, they'll have 90 seconds to answer their question. Now, Todd has the rules of the game. There will be no biting and no kicking.
Biting? I thought biting was okay. Hi, I'm Todd Buchholz, otherwise known as Fire Weenie. We have just some basic meeting rules. Please be respectful and courteous. No questions from the floor. If you have a question, please write it down and either put it in the box or come up and hand it to me and I'll put it in the squirrel cage. No applause during the responses from the comments, please. I know you, and I know where you live. No hissing or booing. Hugs and smiles, everybody. Let's have some fun with this. One announcement. Sandra Bauer is a board candidate. She's confirmed she tried to confirm her participation today, but unfortunately her 95-year-old mother had an accident, is in an unstable condition, and so she's dealing with some family stuff right now. So let's all keep our good karma going to Sandra, please. And without further ado, I'll squirrel the cage here.
Now we have been instructed to read each question. But in the event that there is a question that is grossly inappropriate, we are going to put that aside.
You guys want to just take one of those microphones? You get an opening statement. 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Your timekeeper candidates is right down here, stage right.
Is it working? It is. Are we going now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Diana Albino, running for the board, and I feel like this is the Democratic primary. We're all up here acting like we're the enemy and fighting each other, and I can't stand it. When the real enemy is out there in the world, we're the counterculture. And I think the biggest thing we need to do is solve the divisiveness between us. And the NAO report said that was one of the most important things we need to be doing. And I hope we're going to start that soon.
and because we have a lot of work to do. We have a climate crisis, we have homophobia and racism and all of that, and we're supposed to be the people that are trying to raise awareness and solve those problems. And I would recommend that we start our strategic plan as soon as possible, basing it on our vision quest that we had. And I think that in the process of doing that, working together, we'll find out that we are actually on the same page. I'd also like to have the bar fair back, as it used to be when it was just the family, and I think it benefits the people who don't make money at the fair, because it's gotten rather spendy to be a volunteer at the fair now, with $80 for a companion or SO and $20 to park. I don't necessarily agree with those, but we're still stuck with them. I'd like to see us have more outreach, environmental outreach, have like a road show that takes mini fairs to the rural parts of the state. And I think that with our money, we could be doing that and spreading our message even farther. Do I have more time? Are we missing a candidate up here? No. Anyway, do I have any more? Let's see. Oh, and I think we're way too crowded. Way too crowded. I had friends who left the fair who could only come for the day, didn't like it. And I think that we have enough money to buy a good lawyer and see if we can't add a Thursday that's a slow time, or do 2 weekends. And if we could do that, I have a plan for what to do with those days in between.
Thank you. And I'm going to be wearing my hat because the lights are so bad.
Just that one.
My name is George Braddock, and I'm currently on the board of directors, and I'm running for re-election. I sit on the budget committee. I also sit on the financial planning committee. This past year, I was part of the executive director hiring committee that ultimately led to the hiring of Wally as the new executive director. I think that I have a great deal of interest in the changes that are occurring within the fair. And I very much so support some of the moves that have happened in the last year. When I got elected initially, I realized how little I actually knew about the complexity of this organization. And I had been a booth holder for 44 years, and I thought I knew a whole lot about it. But in fact, when I moved out of my particular vision of the elephant and got an understanding of the incredible complexity and diversity of this family and this organization, I likened it to trying to get a drink out of a fire hydrant. So any of these folks up here that are looking to become new board members, the learning curve is pretty vertical. I take my responsibility as a board member very seriously. I embrace the 3 Ds, which is a duty to obedience. We don't live in a world of our own creation as much as we wish we could. We live in the real world, and in the real world, we're subject to all the laws and ordinances and regulations that are out there. And as a member of the board, I'm responsible in terms of protecting the organization and making sure that we're in compliance. There's a duty of care, that I need to do the best I can, the best of my ability to look out for the interests of the fair, to find the facts in the matter, and to use good judgment in terms of the work that I do. And lastly, I have a duty of loyalty to the organization and putting the needs of the organization above my own. And a lot of people may pay words to that, but I can speak to true actions in that way. But I hope to serve you in the future. Thank you.
We can clap after each person.
Are you done? Yes. Okay. I'm John Chewy Burgess. I'm running, actually my candidacy is legitimate this time. I'm not running as a write-in. I have been a member of the fair for going on 35 years. I was on the board of directors until last year for 8 years. I'm running again because I kind of came to a realization that the direction that the board was heading down was not one that I wanted to see this fair go. And I admit that I was part of the turn. And I'm also willing to step up and accept that responsibility, hope for the return to the love of the fair and doing this for the love of the fair, not because we want to do it for any gain, personal or professional. I would like to see us accept the responsibility of this. I also am on 2 other nonprofit boards. Currently, I started my own nonprofit and I'm the operations manager for a very large event. And in both those capacities and in my capacities at the fair over the last 34 years, I've seen a lot of things. And I've done volunteers, I've done booth people, I've done the whole gamut of things at the fair, and I've been on multiple crews. So I just think that we should remember, as Diane so correctly pointed out, we are all one family, and this backbiting nonsense just needs to stop. I don't care who you are. Thank you.
Thank you,
Please keep the applause down until the end. Thank you. I'm John Silvermoon. I currently serve on the board of directors. I've been involved with the fair since 1974. Currently, this last year, I was chair of the Executive Director Search Committee that led to the successful hire of Wally as our Executive Director of the fair. I've been involved with nonprofits doing management level work for over 20 years. I currently am operations manager with Friends of Beaufort Park in Mount Pisgah and deal with $1 million budgets all the time. I think one of the things I've done on the board is probably the board member who's most consistently asked questions about the budget, though Hillary hasn't always appreciated my timing on that. I think the move to a governance board has been long overdue for the fair. I think this will free up the board to work with the membership and work to develop a strategic plan so that we can actually get some of the things done that we've talked about for many years. My prime example is if someone had told me 40 years ago that we'd still be using the same porta potties 40 years later, I would have said you're crazy. We're going to have a solution to that. Well, we haven't, because so much of the time of the board involved in operations is just doing the next year's fair and not being able to look ahead. I think it's a positive move we're making. I think that it's going to be important that the board, in its oversight responsibilities, make sure that the provisions in the job descriptions calling for a collaborative management style, for participation, for effective means for folks and stakeholders to be involved in how board decisions get operationalized. That's going to be critical. And that's one of the things that, if I have the honor of serving again, that I'm going to be focused on as a board member.
Wave, I'm not going to be able to see your signs. It's dark out and I'm wearing sunglasses. I'm running for the board because I'm not happy with the direction of the fair. Our boards haven't been proactive about planning for... What? Oh, John Steinhardt. Our boards haven't been proactive about planning for our future, which has been leaving us struggling with a lot of avoidable problems. Among those is not making the transition from a personality-based to a policy-based organization. There are about as many people in the fair after hours now as we used to have during the day. We can't all know each other, and good policy is needed so that everybody's treated equitably. Much of my professional life has been spent working with growing companies. Organizations reflect the behavior of those at the top. The level of internal unrest, distrust, and angst is at the highest level that I've observed in my almost 30 years as a volunteer. We're not magically different than other organizations. This comes from the top. We appear to be getting more authoritarian in our management style. In my experience, this doesn't foster the creativity that is essential to the fair's magic. We need to manage with a light touch because creativity can't be ordered. Organizations often fail when management surrounds themselves with yes men because differing viewpoints aren't heard. We're not on a good path when members of our management team malign volunteers for having different opinions, whether at board meetings, high training, or online. It's not a good path when people with different opinions are forced or manipulated out of their roles. I prefer a path where education and transparency are used to change opinions and to build consensus. If I had to choose one bumper sticker that sums up an essential fair attitude to me, it's question authority, and I'm not sure why we tend to be discouraging that these days. It doesn't benefit us. Many of the people running for the board in this election have been on the board before. They all say we need to move forward in a different way, but they're the ones that got us here. While they have better name recognition than the newbies, if they were able to change our direction, they would have done it by now. Please vote for the new faces, even if you don't vote for me. Some define insanity as doing the same thing, expecting different results.
Hello all, my name is Justin Honey. I am currently on the board, and I have been proud to be a part of this organization now going on 28 years. I think 1991 was my first year with my lovely wife. During that time, I've had the honor to be able to be what I call hyper-involved and work through all aspects of the organization, and have been booth registration coordinator for now 14 years. And it's an honor to lead this crew as an operational crew of the fair, and within my crew and my volunteerism within the fair, I think I've done a lot of work in terms of trying to understand the whole entirety of this organization. Working through various different committees, food committee, craft committee, and understand the needs and be supportive and collaborative from booth registration in terms of working with our food vendors and our booth vendors in order to build systems and move us forward. As I looked at running for the board again, we are obviously in a very transitional time with a lot of passion and emotion. We don't have a whole lot externally that is coming at us, so it feels like we are definitely spending a lot of time on one another. I'm proud to be a part of the board and with the people that are currently serving on the board. We are, if anything, so passionate that as we talk about strategic planning, looking at the opportunity to focus our efforts on our top priorities. We have been brought down as a board and as an organization by wanting everything now across the board. And everybody's trying to address everybody's issues simultaneously has basically put us in a position of inaction on almost everything. And that is very challenging as a board to have those conversations without that focus. So hopefully this board and the people that get elected can focus and achieve something within this organization. I thank you for your time.
Hello family, I'm Como Gustafson. I've been a part of the fair for about 25 years now. Most of my years of involvement have been with pre-post security, our early late crew, which is a part of pre-post security, and I'm honored to have been asked recently to join on with Fair Central. Coming out of last year's election, when I did run as well, I had intended on running again this year, but because of delays in my being able to move down this direction and my involvement with starting my own company and getting it up off the ground, a lot of my time and energy was taken away. And I had kind of gotten to the point where I decided I wasn't going to run again because I was focusing on my business. But as we ended up getting closer and closer to this election season, I received many messages asking me if I would consider running again. And that motivated me to put my name in the hat one more time. We are in a position where we're going through a lot of changes as an organization. It's caused a lot of strife amongst the family. And I don't think that necessarily the changes we're experiencing are what have caused that strife so much. It's more specifically the path we've taken to implement those changes. There's a huge feeling amongst a lot of the membership that we as members are not being listened to. We're not being given the opportunity to even hear or understand what is happening. And it's a very scary thing when we're going through a period of change and we feel like our voice isn't being heard. As necessary as the changes are that we are experiencing, we need to take a different approach to going through those changes. And I hope to be able to be a part of that. Developing good policy and procedures to implement those policies. Being involved in business, one thing that you never do is you never execute without a solid plan laid out in place. And it seems like we're selectively choosing what we're going to change and what we're not going to change, and not having that plan laid out beforehand. Thank you.
Hello. Hi guys, my name is Lisa Cooley. Total greenie here. So I have been at the fair for 25 years. Can you hear me? Now I can hear myself. Okay, so I've been at the fair for about 25 years. I was the coordinator for the lower reefer crew for about 18 years. This was my last year as the coordinator, leaving it in very good hands. I love the fair, you guys. It's always been my special spot, my heart piece. It is the place where I come to rejuvenate every year. I get to spend every summer with my family. And we all know what family is. Our crews are our family. Our people that we spend our time with are our family. And we're all just one big giant family, right? So, but just like all other families, we're a little bit dysfunctional. We have our disagreements, we have our arguments, we have times that we don't listen to each other and times that we don't see eye to eye, which is okay, but we need to acknowledge that we have those disagreements and we need to move forward from that. We love each other and it's our obligation and our responsibility to care for one another. And I feel that the fair is kind of at a crossroads where we need to learn and go back to the basics of loving each other and caring for each other and being responsible for our fair and for each other and learning to listen again. Those are real important things to me right now because like I said, it's my huge special spot. I run for the board right now because I have really good ideas. I haven't done this before, but I have really good ideas. And I feel like I also have leadership skills and communication skills and the ability to communicate ideas to other people. And I think that involving our membership and the people that do the jobs out there, like me for many years, we have so much better idea. Oh. Sorry. Done.
42 years since we're all telling our history. Many names, the one you'll find on the ballot is Palmer Parker.
What's your name?
Palmer Parker, it's the name I was saying when you asked what was my name.
Let him talk, please.
Thank you. Hello to Fair family and my fellow candidates. These are strange times. The fair is hugely successful by most measures. I am reminded, however, that when there is not an external threat for us to collectively assemble against, we tend to eat our own. I am here tonight because I felt that more than one side should be represented. Despite protestations to the contrary by the organizing groups, I am concerned that there may not be a, quote, level playing field, unquote, here. This evening's gathering was created by, in essence, special interest groups, political parties, outside the normal fair structure of electoral processes. I would implore you to have an open mind and attempt to be impartial. For the record, I will be leaving immediately at the conclusion of this gathering because I will already be 2 hours late for my evening's employment. We are blessed with numerous long-term employees who serve our family well, far beyond a bureaucratic 40-hour week. Every employee, to my knowledge, was a successful candidate of an open hire. Maybe not Jeff, I may be wrong on that one. Crystalline is fair, promoting from within capitalizes on knowledge and experience gained on the job. Crystalline is fair born. I have seen her reach out across all strata, offering her contact information and an open invitation to meet. Fair management has also attempted to instill accountability where it has been lacking. This, I believe, is the major reason we are here tonight. I have experienced only a very small dose of what has been named in our paid employees. I know the pain, for lack of a better word, of maintaining confidentiality while others repeatedly spread their version of events. So often it becomes its own form of reality, despite documentation to the contrary. I know little of the CRG, though the resignations of Cody, Kirk, Loretta, Ren, and Amy speak volumes. Decades of friendships and productive working relationships, perhaps even the fair itself, are on the line, and I can only wonder how this chapter of Susie Przansky's next book will read. Looking forward, I intend to work for more board work sessions and continued transition to a governance board.
Hi, Paxton Hogue. I'm not very good at speaking out to a group of audience. I've been involved in the fair since the beginning. I helped worked on the one in 1969, the very first fair. And I've been involved in nonprofit organizations for many, many years, having started an environmental council, the Clarksville Environmental Council, the community store in Astoria, KMUN radio station in Astoria, and I helped start KOCF here. It took quite a bit of work shepherding that process through the board to get it to get it done, and now it's accepted and doing a wonderful job. I really support the move to a governance board. The policy governance board spends its time getting super clear about what our values are and what the end results we want. This is what I feel we need. We also need to do some strategic planning. For most of our life, we've gone from year to year now, and we really need to think in terms of 3 and 5 years in the future where we're going. We have a lot of things that on our plate that we need to do planning about. I just helped start the streaming of the board's meetings in the interest of transparency and participation. My crew work is video crew, and I really would like to use the technology, for open board work sessions on a regular schedule. I think we can put them on our normal schedule. In the past, I've been one of the strongest supporters of board work sessions, and have continued to push for them. I really felt that we have missed them in the last 2 years. I took 1 year off as a board member, and then ran again for 1 term here. I'm asking you support me for a 2nd term. And anyway, thank you very much.
Hi, family. My name is Stephen Berkson, though many of you may only know me as Fire Dick. I don't want to repeat my candidate statement to you except to expand on my prior experience, because you only get 300 words. I served on the Hoodland Fire District Board of Directors for 8 years, 6 of those as the board's chairperson. I'm also committed to the MAGIC platform, which you can find at ocfmagic.org. I think it contains things that we are missing and things that we need. Because it illustrates my perspective, I'd like to respond to one of the questions recycling crew coordinators submitted to the candidates. They asked several questions about how to address our 7th generation and carbon neutral pledges in light of our growth in both size and population. These are complex, multifaceted strategic planning questions. I have plenty of notions, but neither I nor any other single person is an expert in every aspect and perspective on these matters. The answer needs to start with the family. We utilize the breadth of our family's wisdom and knowledge to guide us. Many steps towards these goals are being taken, such as the expansion of Peach Power, the work for a new compost barn, and the Carbon Neutrality Working Group. I think we should refocus the Carbon Neutrality Working Group to include the 7th Generation Pledge, or create a group specifically focused on the 7th Generation Pledge. That group can gather our family expertise, look at the fair as a whole, survey the membership, and collaborate with other working groups to discern an overall plan. Collaboration on this scale is hard work, and it does not always make for fast resolutions, but it's the fair way, and it has produced the good, well-rounded decisions that have sustained us for a very long time. This is the approach that should have been taken with examining the NAO recommendations. What we need are good policies and processes to effectively facilitate the decision-making that puts the family and all its collective wisdom in the driver's seat. Thank you very much.
Hi. Thanks for taking the time to be here today. Sorry about the hat. It's the only way I can see you with all these lights. My name is Sue Theolis. I'm asking for your support in this election. In 1987, I moved to Oregon and went to my first fair that year and realized I had found my spiritual home. My fair life started the very next year volunteering in the community village fruit booth. I then became booth rep, village camp host, elder, and a juried crafter in 2009. Over the years, I've gone to many evaluation meetings, work sessions, high trainings, and teddy bear picnics when they're on Sundays. In 2012, I was elected to the board and served 3 terms. I currently serve on craft, food, path planning, endowment, budget, and financial planning committees. While I was on the board, I attended nearly all of the coordinator meetings in order to learn more about the crews, their specific challenges, and how they are all interconnected. This work has given me a broader view of how we are all connected in creating the life-affirming base of Country Fair. In looking at the current board and all the candidates, I realize I'm the only one whose primary role during the event is that of booth member. Even George will tell you that the sauna is far more than a booth. Booth members do a lot for the fair. Some food booths made huge donations to the Jill Fund this year, as they've done in the past. Some of them cook for Culture Jam. Craft and food donate most of the prizes for the Culture Jam raffle at Spring Fling, and many volunteers all year round on committees and other fair projects. Since better decisions are made when a variety of stakeholders are represented, it is important that a booth person become part of the board. As I've said before, real magic takes hard work. I'm up for it. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Terry Baxter, and Hi, my name's Terry Baxter, and I am currently the archivist for the Country Fair. I've been a professional archivist for about 34 years, and I've been an archivist with the fair now for 8 years. The reason I'm running for the board is that I believe in the successful boards I've been on before, a diversity of kind of perspective and opinion is invaluable. I think it really creates a stronger board, and I think I bring a few things that might be a little bit different to the current makeup of the board. And both of them relate to my professional career. The first is transparency. In archives or public records, transparency is a vital part of the work that we do, but it's also vital in building trust between leadership and membership. And the more transparent you can be, the more people will understand what you're doing. And they may not agree with you, but at least they believe that you're acting in good faith. The second is kind of a long arc view of things. Vin Deloria Jr. Said that we should take the 7th generation and turn it around a little bit and see ourselves as the 7th generation, stretching 3 generations back and 3 generations forward, and being the people that can transmit the values and the stories and the culture of our ancestors to our descendants in a meaningful way. And I think that it comes to mind that this is not new. The strife that we're seeing now is not new. The fair's had strife before. And people have worked through it collaboratively, but they've done it by seeing through a vision for what the future could hold, what our children could see in the fair, and see that as important. So that's why I'm running.
Good evening, all. My name's Tom Barr. 20 years at the fair. I've spent the last 10 years on recycling crew. I'm running for the board for the reason most people are. I think we all feel we have something to add. We have something to say about the direction that the fair wishes to go in. And it starts with the board. The board sets policy, and I apologize for those who dislike that. That's the nature of how this works. The board directs the management. Management then operates the operations. That's what happens. But let us consider what that actually means in real terms. And this is my experience with the fair. The board and the management don't really know what Recycling Crew does. I think that everybody appreciates what we do in the sense that it's really important. But we as a crew also have a view of what to do in the future, and we also look to see what our job is going to be like. Why? I've said this at board meetings, and I'll say it to you. Recycling Crew has its face on the growth of the fair. That is to say, every time we grow, we get kicked in the teeth. We work really hard, so we notice when changes happen. Last year, we had the biggest fair ever, and we knew it. As a result, we, the Recycling Crew, are obligated to talk to management, to talk to the board, to talk to other parts of the fair in an effort to do our job. Management learns from us. The board learns from us. We learn from food booths, excuse me. And may I give a shout out at this moment to food crews for helping our job. But the point is, it is participation by us, the members, that validates the ability of the management to do operations and the board to plan policy. Let us do so in that manner. Thank you.
Okay, now you can applaud. Catherine has a brief message.
Hi. I have a little bit of a point of order that I'd like to talk to you about. We have a candidate who was scheduled to be here but did not respond in time to our deadline that we had set. We asked for RSVPs from our candidates. We sent a couple of emails and then a phone call. And then for the very tardy people who hadn't responded, we gave them a deadline of noon yesterday. And there were a few people that we pretty much held to that quite tightly. However, I've been asked, in the interest of fairness, probably, and full participation, to ask the board members, or the candidates on stage, how you would feel about allowing this gentleman to come up and participate in the forum, even though he missed the deadline. Please, what I see is, okay, all right, I think it's a yes, and Stephen Durkee, please come up. I'm glad you're here, and please come up, give your candidate statement, and I don't know, we'll find you a chair to sit down, and then we're going to begin the questions. Thanks, Stephen.
Seconds. Well, thanks everybody for letting me participate. My name is Stephen Durkee. I am on the construction crew and will be a coordinator again soon. It's been a lot of fun building the fair, and in that time when it came to the construction crew, things were kind of disorganized. And some of the things that we did to improve our own transparency were simply talking about the plans that we made. And that's really where the board sits right now, and making a plan that everybody can transparently see and operate and function, not just year to year, multiple years. Everybody knows what the role is, everybody knows what the goal is. And that kind of planning and transparency is really where we're at and where we need to move forward. And that's the direction the board needs to move in creating those plans and working with everyone to implement them. Professionally, I've been involved in disaster planning and working with a variety of committees on a regulatory level at universities. I've served on a nonprofit board and developed a social media campaign. Excuse me. I've also served on a variety of professional boards. and planning committees for different events. So I look forward to bringing the practicality and simplicity I have for creating process and order to the board and to the planning process to create the transparency that we all want in creation of administrative policies and a plan for us all to move forward and enjoy the fair. Because once the fun stops, the fun stops. So let's keep the fun going.
We can start telling jokes.
Okay, can you guys all hear me up on the stage?
It's hard to hear you.
That's going to be a problem. All of them can hear, but you guys need to hear the questions. So just as a point of process, when you start talking is when she's going to hit the stopwatch to start. So is Diane has the first question?
Did you divide this up yet? You mentioned that. Catherine?
I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Odds and evens, yeah.
You're exactly right. We divided people there by alpha order, first name, odds and evens. We could flip a coin to see who goes first, odds or evens, and then rotate through that. Tails. Tails. Who wins?
And that would be Diane going first.
Okay.
There you go.
Odds are first.
All right. We do that.
Do you think it's feasible, reasonable, to ask if the fair has gotten too big? Who would you think of keeping gate admission, how would you think about keeping gate admissions capped?
Oh, I absolutely. I can be loud,
I absolutely think we need to deal with this issue. I don't want to see anybody excluded, which is why we have to think outside the box. And as a person who tried to go in the aid with my grandson last year to see this fair, to see a show, it was crowded where it's never been crowded before, which would be up at Art Park area. And it was painful, and I had several friends left the fair after about 2 hours. And we're not giving a good quality product to our paying public. And I don't know how much of that is the fact that we might be outnumbering them. And maybe we need to limit our time in the 8 during the day. I don't know what the solution, we have to deal with it because it's not fun and a lot of people are not going to want to come anymore if it doesn't get better.
So can you repeat the question? What?
Do you think it's feasible or reasonable to ask if the fair has gotten too big? What would you think of keeping gate admissions capped?
As a camping crew coordinator, I think the fair has definitely gotten too big internally. That said, the question I think is more specifically about the public and the capping of admissions. And after experiencing this fair in a very limited way because my fiance burned herself so badly on Tuesday that we weren't at the fair. I still was there on Friday and on Sunday, and it was ridiculous. It was silly, and that's not fair to any of us, the big we, including the public. So I think that we need to try and thoughtfully think about that question. And I don't have an answer to it, As Diane said, there's many aspects to our band, in particularly I'm paraphrasing Diane, paraphrasing, not being quoting. But I want to be clear that in paraphrasing her, I think that we really need to do this with thoughtfulness and with input from everybody, including probably maybe even doing a polling of the paid public, because they didn't have a good time when they can't go, they can't move. So that's my answer. I'm sorry if it's vague, but that's the best answer I can give. There's a problem.
Well, it's kind of an interesting question. I think we do need some absolute cap on membership just because we only have so many services available. I didn't think this year was this bad compared to 1998 when you couldn't breathe or even turn around in the path. I don't really think the public's the problem. They kind of pay for our event. When I started, we had like about 3,000 people there at night. This year was what, 17,000-ish or something like that. The public's not being the problem. It's kind of uncontrolled growth due to lack of planning and policy around that. But again, obviously we can't have in more people than we have parking spaces or porta potties or anything like that. But we don't actually hit our cap most years, so I don't know if it's that big of a deal.
Okay, so growth is obviously becoming a little bit of a problem. We are hitting the wall or hitting the ceiling, so to speak. Capping is something that we definitely need to look into, and everybody needs to be given the opportunity to give input when it comes to deciding if that's something that we do implement. As with most situations, I think that there's more than one solution. We just have to have a serious talk about what those solutions might be. I would hate to see us have to put a cap on anything. I think we can be more creative and come up with a better way of dealing with the problem that might benefit everybody more, instead of making people feel like they don't get to be a part of the family anymore, or don't get to go this year because they didn't have the money soon enough to buy their ticket. So.
I have to echo what Como says. Being where my particular crew is, we're way out in the Miss Piggy lot, like way out. And it's really hard to come up with a good solution for capping the amount of people. We want people to enjoy our experience, but the sanitation, the amount of trash and recycling, the amount of damage and stewardship to the land, there's a whole lot to think about. I don't know how to, I don't have a real answer for how we go about that, but I think it needs to be really thought about.
Planning's one of the things I'm most interested in. I think this is the perfect question to ask in a strategic planning process. Yes, we do need to figure out how and where and when we can grow. And we have done this really very randomly. When we added a large area like Xanadu, we added a lot of crews to support it. And those are necessary also. It's one of those things I think that you just need to plan for. And in part, we have not done a very good job. Our planning is year to year often, and we really need to think more for the future. I also am a little, when we were young when we started the fair, we didn't have kids. Now we're in our 4th generations. And I think that's a very valuable part of the fair, is to have multiple generations coming and working up in the fair. So I am a little loath to say people can't come, but I think we need to plan for those that do come.
I believe that we have a reasonable public cap. I think we need to look internally. On food committee, food booths come to us at times because they want to increase their crew numbers. We have a number of criteria they have to meet in order for us to grant them the okay for 1 or 2 more additional passes. Then there are times when a booth cuts back on their hours or cuts back on their menus, and their passes will get reduced because they don't need quite so many people. In craft booths, our passes are fairly limited. And I know working with Budget Committee, we look hard at what the crew pass allocations are, what their pass allocations were in previous years, and how any increase is justified. My interest is making sure that all of us there are in a safe situation and that we're running things efficiently. Because efficiency will help preserve the land, which is getting fairly beat up. In my booth, we have green space and we have a sapling. Those are rare things in East 13th. So we need to make sure that when we're asking for increases in a crew or in services, that we see how that works with the overall size and be judicious in our growth. Thanks.
To start with, I have to echo Sue. This is not about the public. Last year was a big year, but most years the public is between 45, 48,000. It is not that big of an impact on what we do. The 17,000 of us that have wristbands are. The damage is done. It is here. Our limit of growth has been achieved. The problem is, I think as Paxton pointed out, no one really wants to not be here. We love this place. It is a great place. It is a place we want our grandchildren and great-grandchildren to come to. But we have reached our limit. And that does mean, when we plan, some people, if they do not get their self together in time, will not be available for passes. That has to be because the damage has been done. If we wish to plan and make it a larger event, if we wish to make it so that we separate it into different time spaces so that we can bring in more people, fine. But the damage is done, and the work needs to be done now. Thank you.
New question for Palmer.
Who knew I'd be that lucky?
So I'll try to explain this. We had counted out, we were supposed to do it odd and even, and then we got off track, and now we're trying to get back on track. So we're going to have half of the folks, yeah, we have a process, we're trying to struggle through it. Thank you.
Okay. So where Palmer's going? Okay. Outside of this is what I do for my pass, can you tell us what else you do for the fair?
Yes. Peach truck horn button. In all the years I've driven the peach truck, that button has not worked. But it looks really good. It's a lot like me. I have been coordinator of computers, of media, Fair Central for decades, Pathrobe the last few years. My job description at this point is, here's your vehicle sticker, here's your radio, go do what you do. And that's what I do. When it was raining at the sticker booth, I had already put up plastic on the booth reg end, and yes, I am married to a new booth reg co-coordinator. There is a correlation there. I heard that the troubleshooting end were not happy that they were getting rained on, so I took extra plastic, went over there and made like a monkey, covered troubleshooting end with plastic. So I go where I go, I do what I do. Hopefully if you need something, you come to me, I know who can do it. I say you two are good people, go solve your problem, and I mosey onward.
Steve, where it was going.
We'll figure this out by the end of it.
Okay, so my name's Stephen Bergson, Fire Dick, and I'm a co-coordinator for Fire Crew. And a lot of people don't know that Fire Crew also handles a lot of the road watering and dust abatement stuff, which was sort of an acquired duty, and I've been working pre-fair the last few years with it, so I end up helping him do what he does a lot, and in terms of the dust abatement stuff. I also served on the CRG in its founding, and that's been a heck of a lot of time put in. And other than that, I've been just increasing my involvement every year for the last 10 years out of the almost 20 I've been here.
I like to think of myself as a sparkly presence. But besides that, most of the archivist work is done not during the fair time. So I do most of my work in the archives, outside of those hours. But when I'm at the fair, I do a lot of work at the still living room. I help set up the still living room, and I do at least 2, maybe 3 shifts at the still living room, just because I like to chat with folks. It's people, both the elders come through there, but a lot of people just stop and rest there, and it's a really great place to talk to people as they're coming through the fair site.
George.
I run the sauna, and pre and post fair, we provide showers and saunas for people that are setting it up and tearing it down. The sauna also contributes significantly to wonderful art in the fair. We maintain and care for Just Say Please Park, which has the most comfortable seating in the fair and one of the most beautiful parks. This year, we assisted in the creation of the craft demonstration area in collaboration with the 50th anniversary folks. We staff the Story Pool Pavilion as a listening station, doing some of the surveying and inquiries we have with the fair family, asking questions about the purpose of art in our lives and how people see the fair into the future. I think the sauna contributes many ways, and that is where I get my pass.
Okay, so at the fair itself, operationally, I'm one of the coordinators of dog control crew. In recent years, one of the things we've done on the crew is expanded into providing services to folks with service animals and trying to screen people who are bringing what may or may not be service animals and dealing with that. Also made sure that our crew every year has a space for a teen crew grad. So someone who, from that generation, who can no longer do teen crew, we usually can put them on our crew every year. In terms of my service on the board, as I mentioned earlier, I was chair of the ED Search Committee. I've been on LUMP. The ED Search over the last year kind of took me away from LUMP for a while, Land Use Management Planning. I hope to come back to that. I'm on the Diversity Committee. I'm on the Financial Planning Committee. I'm on the Archaeology Committee. I used to work as a professional archaeologist, so I offer my expertise there. And I also see myself as a board member being a resource. I try to make myself available to folks in the fair who have an issue, who have a concern, who have a question, and try to either help them answer that or direct them to the folks and the resources that can address their issue or can answer their question.
Okay, as I stated earlier, a booth registration is how I get my pass, being a coordinator for and being a part of that amazing crew for 25 plus years. Outside of that, a lot of interconnectivity through booth registration keeps me busy year round. Me and my family live and breathe the fair year round. With liaisoning and being available and to help work through food, craft, path planning. It seems like booths and their issues and their needs touch a lot of places, and I've kind of fulfilled the role in booth registration as an advocate to reach out and make sure that those needs are understood. Outside of that, I've had the pleasure to be on numerous hiring committees before I got on the board, a part of PC, as well as working with an amazing group of people with the Xanadu development with Charlie and Hillary and Sally and Kirk and everybody we met every week for almost 2 years in the development of that with the help of Crystalline and Shane and even Tom at the end as we came through the various different developments to what now is Xanadu. So the fair to me is a year-round love, it's a year-round passion. Some people say I'm crazy with the amount of time that we put into this organization, but to me it's a rejuvenation of love and spirit, and it's an honor to be a part of. So, thank you.
For my crew, I manage a construction barn called the Zen Barn, where we have all our supplies, equipment, any tool that people need, all kinds of things. A lot of folks are familiar with it from visiting that. And managing that takes up a lot of time, and that's a huge amount of the effort that I put in at fair. And surrounding that barn for about 6 days is a campground, and both with our own crew and with the campers who show up during fair, there's always a need for extra toilet paper to keep community things flowing. Sometimes circuit breakers are blown, so just making sure everybody's comfort is there during the fair. And then after everyone leaves, there's usually a few things that get left behind in that area, so I make sure I pick that up and keep that area patrolled and provide extra things that way. I'm looking forward to expanding work with the board and involvement with committees to bring more ideas forward.
Do artists, booth reps need representation? Who and why? Do artists or booth reps need representation? Who and why?
Yes. Who? I think it's self-identifying in the question. It's the booth reps and the artists. I really don't understand what that question is, and maybe
they mean some kind of liaison between themselves and.
Well, as a founding member of the CRG, one of the plans of the CRG is to facilitate other advocacy groups for entertainers, for booth people, for any member of the fair that's underrepresented. When the CRG started, we had an election. There were 10 people elected. That was by consensus of the coordinators. We have discussed this quite a bit. Some people felt left out as they're on the contact sheet, and that was not our decision on the CRG. That was handed down to us from management that we should do it with coordinators only at the beginning. So to answer the question, yes, and we should set up advocacy groups for all of the fair people so everybody gets represented, not just coordinators. That's the starting point. I've read the NAO ad nauseum. I believe that the NAO has some really good things in it, and I believe that the NAO has some things that we should probably try and work on. Thank you.
Okay, well, this is kind of a weird question because I'd prefer we had an organization where we didn't all have to be advocating for stuff all the time. Something I've written the board about for decades is that we've grown a lot and our management system has not grown in pace with everything else that's grown. Something that happens in the outside world when things grow is eventually you get a layer of vice presidents, you get middle management. I think we need that really badly. I kind of think we need a manager of security, a manager of physical infrastructure. We need things to be represented because nobody likes us when that happens and they don't get to be one of them. But eventually people say, wow, now when I need something, I can actually get it done and I can get heard. You ever try to get any of Charlie Ruff's time back when he was GM? You were lucky to get 5 seconds, before the sheriff showed up or something. So I think we need a different management structure so that people can get heard and can get time. One of the things I always hear back to that is, well, that's what the bums are for. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for the bums as crisis managers, but you've heard the adage that when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Crisis managers are not the same thing as managers, and if everything is treated as a crisis, that's not really management, and that's kind of how we've treated ourselves. So I do think we need a layer, not just for artists, not just for, I forget who else was in the question, but everybody needs to be organized in a way that they can get heard and listened to and have a two-way flow of information without having to fight for somebody's time.
Okay, so I believe that the answer to this one's pretty short and simple. Yes, every single member of our family and organization deserves representation. To follow up on what Chewy said, I believe, I can't wait until we can get through these initial road bumps in the formation of the CRG so that we can start focusing on actually developing resource groups for all the other areas of the family where people do feel underrepresented.
We're getting back on track, so please bear with us. This really is when we grouped these groups up, and then we got a new person in, and everything kind of got screwed up a little bit. So we're trying to get back to the original. Every other person, Palmer, you were in this one group, and everybody else is another group. So please bear with us. So thanks. Go right ahead.
I bared with this in '98. Full Monty. Would you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Do artists or booth reps need representation? Who and why would represent them? Or what would represent them?
Yes, they need representation as everyone else does. It's a representative process that we have here. Am I a booth person? No. You don't want anything that I make in the way of art or craft. I have other skills. How? Well, you know, we've got a board that gets elected every year. We have coordinatorships that change. You can get involved in crews. You can, you know, there's just all sorts of ways to create your own reality within the fair. And by doing that, the ripple that you create in the pond gets bigger and goes and makes other ripples. I think it's great when there are booth people on the fair board. I think it's great when there's coordinators on the fair board. I think it's great when there's volunteers on the fair board. You can create your own path in many ways.
Okay. So the answer is yes. I'm also was on the founding member of the CRG, and this was along with trying to create some grassroots policy for a lot of the issues that have troubled the fair. We were also addressing this very issue. Advocacy, I think, is a good word. Think of it as advocacy for your perspective, not necessarily an us versus them type of advocacy, but just a representation of the different points of view. And whether or not that comes through one organization or through several organizations, I do think that all of the interests of the fair need to have a voice. And I think that the thing I'm concerned about when I hear about management and when we have a board is that we're supposed to be forging a community and making a different way to have community. And part of that has been an association of equals and all the collaboration and co-creation that we do. And you can't do that from top down. You do that by gathering people together, collecting their wisdom, moving those decisions through your own organic sifting process to where we get something that we all appreciate. And that's what we've been doing, and that's the fair. And what we need to do is do it better because we're bigger and not just throw it away.
I'm not really sure how I can rephrase this one more time, but yeah, I mean, of course, everybody needs representation, and there's several different ways to do it. You could be represented in leadership, like say on the board, but I do like Chewy and Coma's idea about the, you know, some sort of mirror of the CRG group to represent, you know, booths and entertainment. I think that that makes a ton of sense to me, but whatever it is, again, you know, like Steve said, representation matters, and people need to feel like they're part of the process and that their views are being heard.
Well, I think that, you know, in a group where we are all self-representing ourselves, as we've all heard, you show up and you can speak your piece and get involved with things that way. No, as far as like advocacy for specific things or issues associated with booth reps or artists, a process, a clear process in place for that to happen needs to be in place, and then they have the advocacy, they have a path to follow for any issues that would show up for them. But I may be misunderstanding the question as well, but a booth rep in and of itself has some sort of contact with fair and some sort of representation. in and of itself. So I'll just leave it at that.
I think when you get on the board, you represent the whole fair. And that includes entertainers, that includes craftspeople, that includes the food booth, that includes the crews, that includes everybody. And it's a duty of a board member to rise above whatever particular part of the fair that they come from and to see the larger picture, to get the bird's eye view. And I don't call crafters vendors, I don't call food booths vendors, because that sounds like somebody that just goes from fair to fair. And I consider our people to be part of the family. And I think it behooves all board members to represent all of the fair. And fortunately, people usually reach out to me, entertainers talk to me and ask, you know, before the elections, and booth people and all of them. And I think it's important for us to represent everybody.
We'll have a new question. We'll start with George.
And then you guys get to take a bathroom break.
We're going to take a break after this next set of questions, and please let these folks go to the bathroom first. No applause until after the meeting. Go. 15-minute break. There we go.
How do you explain the rancor of the past 2 years? Transparent questions, that's what you get.
I'd say that's a multifaceted question, which would then require a multifaceted answer. I think that a big part of it, to be honest, is, and much of what I keep hearing circulating around the candidates here, is this theme of a lack of a strategic plan. And I think that the fair in many ways has been a while, maybe 10 years, since we really went back and looked hard at our values and at our goals and what we wanted to become. And I think a lot of this angst that's arriving now is that notion of what does the future hold? And in some cases, it kind of feels like the sky is falling because we don't know what to anticipate. So I think it's really going to be incredibly critical that we put together a really thoughtful strategic plan moving into the future, and that we go way out of our way to make sure that everyone is involved, every voice is heard, and that at the end we can come out with fresh and views and values that we all embrace. Once again, become the brand of the Oregon Fair.
I agree with much of what George has said on that question. I think in some ways there have been issues that have been held confidential. I think probably a lot of the rancor that got going revolved around the board's decision to let go the caretaker. And that was something that we couldn't talk about as we were going through that process. I happened to not vote to, I would not have voted to eliminate the caretaker, but the rest of the board did that. Subsequently, the complaint that was filed as that being a wrongful discharge was dismissed by the Bureau of Labor and Industries for lack of evidence that there was any kind of harassment or sexual harassment going on in that case. So up to that point, I as a board member really could not talk about the details or the information that I had. I could not talk about the closed sessions we had consulting with our attorneys or consulting with our insurance company about this issue. And so only one side got to kind of present its story. And I think that's unfortunate. And I see the stop sign, so I'll have to end there.
Okay, so with this question, like George and John both said, there's definitely a lot of issues that brought us to the point of I think the word was rancor, is the word. That's a kind word, and it's it's multifaceted in the aspect that we had a lot of things that worked as an organization through the hiring of our last GM with Tom, the dissolution of that, the decision not to go forward with him as our leader of our organization, the impact and the consternation and decision and trying to figure out what the next direction was, and the impact that that had on our staff. Staff being overwhelmed to the point of facing what's in front of us. And as we looked at the overall issues, like I spoke about earlier, there's a lot of needs and desires for this organization and very passionate people out there. And there also was coupled up against the board and management trying to adhere to the guidelines and the code of conduct and hold some behavior accountable. And those people that were a part of that and the board that was a part of that, I feel were basically put in a position of retribution for those actions. And those are still out there to this day, and they're very hard decisions. I believe they were the right attempted decisions, and we're still feeling the costs and effect of those.
Okay, so because I haven't been completely involved in all of the rancor that has happened, and I don't have a whole lot of huge history, but I do know stories, maybe gossip, maybe rumor from personal friends. So my thought process for moving forward is to, number one, let's really relook at our values and our mission statement and really get back to that part. And I also think that I think we really need to look at hiring somebody to be in charge of like human resources, somebody that can actually follow policy and procedures, look at our policies and our procedures and follow them consistently and consistently and consistently with a person that's in charge of hiring, firing, disciplinary, that kind of stuff. To me, I think that could avoid a bunch of rancor. If I'm defining the word rancor, right?
This is actually something I thought a lot about, and I actually rancor. I blame Fox News for sowing suspicion, distrust, and fear in the nation, and we only echo it. We're just a small subset. And I think a lot of it is based on suspicion and fear. I think one of the problems that have led us into this is the lack of communication amongst ourselves. And I really miss the workshops, the board member workshops that we used to do, and I want to see them continue. And I've actually figured out a way that we can do these workshops using modern communication techniques that will allow remote process. And I'm actually working on that type of thing. I think communication is really what we need.
Yeah, communication. We need more face-to-face communication because, well, Facebook is not our friend. There are too many things said on Facebook without any evidence, without any thought, and a lot of it is, to me, seems to be just striking out. I so appreciate the people who express themselves clearly on Facebook because that does help. I know that Food Committee is planning a meeting next month with any of the interested food booth reps, and there are a lot of them, because Food Committee is working on some very basic policies, and we want to get feedback from the food booths to make sure that what we're thinking will serve them and the fair well. So it takes face-to-face communication. I know that when I was on the board, a lot of people did not understand the necessity for, and the word just fell out of my head, confidentiality. There we go. Legally, we're bound by confidentiality in so many places, and if we break it, it can expose us to lawsuits and worse. So we need to just sit down and talk more with each other about our concerns, about our fears, about our hopes. Thank you.
Thank you. First, there is a correct answer to the previous question. Entertainment committee, food committee, craft committee, booth reps and entertainers have advocacy. They are perfectly welcome to come in at any time and talk to people who know what their issues are. Thank you. Back to this one. I think we've touched on it already. Policy is really important. Communication is important. I'd like to point out something. When we were having the issue with our caretaker, I looked at our employment policy. Our employment policy is probably not legal. It does not cover our employees. It does not provide us with what we need in policy. This is what board and what personnel committee is supposed to do. It is supposed to provide policy. That being said, I think that the reason why we end up with rancor is because we end up feeling powerless. We end up feeling powerless because we do not communicate with the people we fear to communicate with. Knock on doors. It is very important, if we have issues, to take them up in a positive way that allows us to discuss them. And it's correct, Facebook is not our friend. It's not our friend when we are in a place where we trade accusations. We need to trade ideas.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break. Candidates can go to the bathroom. 10 minutes? 15? Ooh, 15 minutes. Wow. You guys can get a beer. Round 2.
Round 2. Are we ready? This is something.
All candidates to the stage, please. Como, you're wanted on the stage.
Somebody yell out front for Como.
Como out front.
We'll send a search party.
All right, here we go.
All right, candidates, if elected as a member of the Board of Directors, how do you plan on making our fair community a safe and comfortable place for people of color, our LGBTQ family, and our alter-able family? John, you're up first.
Can we get the mics off?
Oh, hello. There we go.
Hold on. We don't have our timekeeper.
Timekeeper. Where's our timekeeper? Where's our timekeeper?
Timekeeper, you have 90 seconds to show up.
I'll start.
Smiley, where have you gone? Maybe she's with Como.
Como's right there.
Como's here. Was Smiley with you?
Stuck out there.
Let me know when you're ready. Go ahead.
Okay, this one seems like a short answer to me. I think we already do. I think we're pretty welcoming of everybody at the fair. When I look around the fair, I think we are more diverse than the community that surrounds us. I know we want to increase diversity, but we also have other goals that are environmental, and I don't think having people drive in and fly in from around the world so we can get a bigger mix than is in the Eugene, Springfield area. Yeah, we have conflicting goals there, but I actually think we're pretty welcoming to everybody except maybe the Proud Boys.
Can I get the question one more time?
Sure. If elected as a member of the Board of Directors, how do you plan on making our fair community a safe and comfortable place for people of color, our LGBTQ family, and our alter-able family?
Okay, so First and foremost, I think we can already consider ourselves to be a safe place for marginalized people within our community. That being said, I would love to see our diversity grow, and that brings to question why we don't have a larger populace of marginalized people coming and joining us in our event. I know that from my hometown in Salem, we have a very, very, very large Latino community who is kind of pretty much absent from most of our city's events that are held. And I think most of the time it's because they don't feel welcome. They don't feel like it's actually there for them. I don't know exactly what it's going to take to make it happen, but I think that we do need to reach out and encourage minorities and people from marginalized communities to come and enjoy what we have to offer. And continue maintaining a safe place for them to be, for sure.
Question again, please. It's long-winded.
It is long-winded. If elected as a member of the Board of Directors, how do you plan on making our fair community a safe and comfortable place for people of color, our LGBTQ family, and our altered abled family?
I think it starts with the individual. I don't know how many of you remember No on 9 in the OCA. I was media coordinator for the No on 9 campaign. My opinion has not changed one iota. If you have come to the McDonald Theater where I work and you are alter-abled in any way, shape, or form that I'm aware of, I will make sure you know where the alter-abled bathroom is. I will make sure you know that you can get upstairs in a wheelchair. It's personal awareness and personal action, and that extends to the larger community. It goes back to the ripple idea.
So I will start out with my personal view. I do think that it's a fairly safe place. I think we do that through the code of conduct, and we do that by our culture and how we treat each other. And I also think that there's room for improvement. But generally, I think it's a fairly safe place. On the other hand, we should look at this like we look at all other things in the fair way. We have a diversity committee, and I certainly support that effort, and we should be looking to them for what do we need to do to improve diversity. I'm off the top of my head, I'm thinking about maybe we need scholarships or something to address the cost for certain communities that don't have as much money to come in. I don't know. But we have a group to work on this. We have an altered abled crew. We can look to them for how can we improve our altered abled access and how can we improve communication. And finally, we need to talk to those groups if there is a disparity, if they don't feel safe, if they don't feel included, if they don't feel accommodated, we need to know why, and we need to know from them. So back to communication, we should engage these groups and we should talk to them and find out what their needs are and find out if we need to do more in our processes to facilitate a solution, because perhaps something needs a solution that we don't have a process for yet. So I say we just need to take what we're doing and do it better and ramp it up to solve these kinds of issues.
Yeah, this question has got two parts, and the first part about being safe is right back to the code of conduct, like Steve said. I think making sure that the code of conduct is enforced, but also it's updated so that people's definitions or feelings about safety change through time, and we need to make sure that the code of conduct keeps up with what makes people feel safe. As far as inclusion goes, in my mind, inclusion is really about removing barriers to meaningful participation. And as Steve mentioned, I don't think we really know what those barriers to other communities are. I don't think we've investigated enough. I don't think we've talked with communities enough. We don't even regularly acknowledge the fact that we're on somebody else's land, both here and when we participate at the fair. And these are all things that are strong barriers to some people's participation. And I know for a fact that there are groups of people that don't come here because they don't feel welcome. And so working through the diversity committee, working through alter-abled, but I think really committing to figuring out what inclusion looks like to people that aren't us is really the key part to making the fair more participatory.
Well, like everyone else, I'd echo that the guidelines and the code of conduct create a safe environment for us all to operate in and operate safely in respect to each other. As far as drawing more people in, increasing diversity, it's likely an issue of interest. Do we have presentations, do we have music acts that draw an interest in? I know a lot of people, myself, I'm smart because I love the Grateful Dead, and there's a huge connection to the Grateful Dead there, but that might not be everybody's thing. Might only play out to a limited group of people. So as we expand programming, or now we may attract different groups of people to enjoy the fair and all the safety that we do create.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between feeling safe at the fair and feeling welcome. And when we've talked about it in the diversity committee, of which I'm one of the founding members, and we're looking for new members, put my plug in, that we have a program where we give out 200 day passes to people of so many different kinds of diversity. And then we try to get some feedback. And of course, I think one of the things is our music is fairly limited, and I've said that we need more reggae and we need a lot of more diversity of music than what we have, even though I also like the Dead. And as far as people, I've had somebody come up and said they had a wheelchair, and boy, they couldn't go anywhere this year because it was so crowded. So, I mean, that's another issue. And just getting the feedback from people who do come. Most of them complain about the same things everyone else does, which is dust and food prices. But I think it's a big thing. I think we need training as an organization. There are groups that do that training, inclusion, equity, and diversity training. And we really need to work on that. We're behind most nonprofits that I know.
So I was a fan of the Grateful Dead, but they don't exist anymore. That said, the anthropological thing that the country fair is, in terms of going reminiscent back to a culture that has now disappeared, which was the culture of the 60s, is something that we can do. That said, I would like to say that the inclusion needs to be by acceptance. Equity is the key. I personally have on my crew an I don't even know what the I'm sorry, I don't know the letterology. I'm really bad at it. But I happen to have a woman who's married to a woman on my crew. That same woman happens to be of a different ethnicity than Caucasian. I think that by including and accepting, we can give equity to those people that have a different perspective than we have, and it's reaching out and equity.
I'm not sure about this one.
Read it and put it.
Yeah, I'll read it and then we're gonna put it down. It says, the red sauce recipe from Toby's, orange sunflower sauce from Rising Moon. I'm not really sure how you guys would address that particular question.
Let's try another one.
Yes.
All the candidates are in favor. Okay, Madison the Federalist warned of the dangerous vice of factions in a democratic society. Do you think this is an issue, and how would you address it? Madison the Federalist.
I want to take a couple of seconds for my answer to address the question that other folks were asked. I do not think that for many people of color, for many LGBTQ folks, and for many alter-abled folks, that they feel the fair is a safe and comfortable place. We have a lot of work to do, and I'm committed to doing that work if I'm reelected. Now, as far as this question is concerned, I think what's important to me is that we do a strategic planning process that, among other things, is inclusive, that looks at what are our values, reaffirming those values. I wonder if we have agreement among ourselves about exactly what are the values of the fair and what are the values that we are trying to espouse and further among ourselves and in the greater community. So I think that's a very core part of the strategic planning process that I would like us to engage in to address that whole question of factionalism that's implicit in that.
As I understand the question, basically I take the tone that says that we are looking at a really interesting time in our organization and through our membership. I think there is a lot of desire to be heard, which I think is part and parcel due to this lack of building up systems in order for communication, whether that's through the committees or and understanding the work that's being done. As somebody that's active year-round, we're doing a lot of amazing work. And I constantly hear through social media, other thing is lack of understanding to the work that's being done and the work that has been done and some of the rationales that go with that. What has started happening in terms of factioning, in my opinion, is we are looking at an organization that is dividing itself up more than uniting itself. And as we look to do that, creating essentially special groups to align and divide and stand against one another, rather than come together and listen as individuals with individual thoughts and individual opportunities to bring forth ideas. And with that being said, we're put in a position of it's either you or them, or us or them. And it's really sad as an organization, and hopefully we can come out of this working together rather than factionalizing our organization. Thank you.
Kind of have to echo what you say, that there is a lot of factious crevices. But I do want to echo what I said in my opening statement. We are a family and we love each other. We've got to figure out a way to get through that. And we can. And I think that it's okay to have disagreements. It's okay for us not to see eye to eye. But we have to be practical about the way that we move forward. We have to work together as a team, and we have to come up with policy, and it needs to be transparent. It needs to, I need to know what's happening as a coordinator. Everybody else that's sitting in this room needs to know what's happening so that we can all have our input. Everybody's input is hugely valuable, and people have genius ideas. And we need to listen to them and we need to put them into place. And I think that that would help clear up some of the divisiveness. And also being a little more humble about it's okay to not see eye to eye, and it's okay to try something different and try something new, move forward, and incorporate some technology too into helping us be more transparent.
I'm going to do the same thing as John and mention that I think we have a goal of, answer the previous question, we have a goal of diversity that we have been following. And I also think that instituting or making sure that we follow Zach's training and the three-chip interaction is an important part of what we do. Get the job done, treat each other with respect, and have fun. In answer to the current question, I'm not sure that We need to follow the Federalist Papers. That was a long time ago and in a totally different world. I think that we can easily have a discussion on values in our work sessions, and I think that's important. I think that's what we really need to be talking about, is what values do we have, what do we want to foster, and where we are. I think strategic planning is an important part of getting people together. I think who we are, where we are going, and why we are here are all questions that each of us should answer. And I believe that we really like to work together, and we know that together we make greater things happen.
Okay, for Tom and George. Factions are no fun. When I got here over 30 years ago, we still all left on Sunday night. I was in Community Village. I was there as a visitor. I was picking up my housemate. To see the love, the joy, the unity, the hugs, the circles, touched my soul. It helped to change my life. Each year at fair, it gets fed. I have a reason for being part of this. And I'm hoping that we need to talk with each other. We need to listen with each other. Why are we here? What do we want to accomplish? What do we want to present to the rest of the world? We've been doing this for 50 years, which is stunning. But when we start being suspicious and untrusting and feel like we don't have a place to put that energy, or have allies who will listen and help us manifest what we want to see in a respectful, calm, measured way, it leads to hard feelings. It leads to acting out. We need to be more respectful of each other, kinder to each other, and a lot more patient, because every single one of us is in this together.
I hope I'm not holding this too close. Kudos to Justin. Kudos to Sue. I absolutely agree with him. I'm sorry, Paxton. I'm sorry, Paxton. I love you. You're wrong. As long as we live in a community that cherishes liberty, the Federalist Papers will be relevant. That being said, faction is the death of community. When we decide that we are no longer us, we can no longer be together. It is extremely important, because we will have problems. We will have difficulties with each other. Sometimes we won't get our way. It is important that we understand that we each not only have the ability, we have the responsibility to speak to each other about our concerns, and I echo Sue, to listen to what we say. We are not in opposition. When we came to the fair last year, after a year of acrimony, we came together. It was a great thing. It was really, really crowded. It was really, really busy. But we did it, and we did it well, and we did it happily. We can do this. Yes, we can, but not with faction.
That in the fair, my observation is that the loyalty and the commitment in the fair has gotten narrower over time. That people are more connected with their crew, with their team, and with their particular aspect of the fair than they are the larger fair community. So they see themselves as part of it, but somehow separate from it. And I think that in order to change that, and we really need an engagement-heavy process. It includes everybody, and it really helps reestablish the values and the importance of the whole. And we are more than individual parts. The fair is successful because of some total of those. And unless we're all on the same page in terms of where those values are, and we share a culture, think that this fractionalism will continue to occur and will become smaller and smaller minorities within the fair.
What would you say to coordinators who are troubled by the current structure and tone of the CRG?
That's a really tough one to answer, considering I don't know how most of the vast majority of coordinators feel about the CRG. If the CRG was what I believe it to be tasked to be, it's there to be a voice for those coordinators and their volunteers. So I guess I honestly can't even answer that question when I'm not privy to what the disagreement is in regards to the CRG. The CRG is what it is, and if they're there to work with and for the coordinators, I don't see why or how there would be disagreement. That is, in fact, the reason why it's there. So my apologies for not being able to give a more specific answer to that question.
Repeat, please.
What would you say to coordinators who are troubled by the current structure and tone of the CRG?
So I will also say I don't know a whole lot about the CRG. I haven't been on the board. I'm no longer a coordinator at this point. If elected, I will learn a whole lot more about the CRG. My understanding is it's a representative group for, I believe we have over 60 crews, and many crews have co-coordinators. So I would say if you're not happy with what's going on, get involved with it. I'm reminded, many of you may remember Daryl Sink. He was the ice guy before his daughter. And Daryl and I had a relationship, a friendship outside the fair. And you know, he was wrong a lot from my perspective. And of course I was wrong from his. But we could agree to disagree and hug and go on about our day. And that's something that I think is sort of missing, and to bring it back around, CRG, like most things, work better if you can agree to disagree, hug, assume the best of intentions, and move forward. I believe that everyone in this room, everyone that's watching in the electronic world, has the best intention for the fair from their perspective. And the more we can get those perspectives to come together through CRGs, through fair committees and that kind of thing, the better off we are. And I will cede my 12 seconds to whoever wants them.
So, actually, I think these last two questions are almost somewhat related. And I can tell you that the CRG, we tried to validate our work repeatedly. We had overwhelming participation from coordinators. We had a mission from coordinators that was validated by an overwhelming vote of the proportion of coordinators that were out there. And we were thrown a lot of roadblocks and a lot of curveballs, and there were some very difficult times. It was one of the most difficult years I've had with the fair ever, from the tension and friction that took place. But we tried to take the high road, and we're still trying to do the right thing, and we have published some structures that we propose for the future. I'd like to take the rest of my time and go back to the factionalism question, because I think it's very important. It has a lot, it becomes an accusation. Factionalization is like polarization, how far apart we become. And the real issue is, it's a very slippery slope and something we have to be careful when we walk. Because if you take someone who disagrees with you and you say, well, you're dividing us and you're creating factions, well, now you're the one who's causing that division by describing those people that way. So it's really about how we treat the people we disagree with and how we treat each other as we're trying to work through disagreements. And it's okay for people to find common cause and common concerns and come together and express them together. There's nothing wrong with that, and that doesn't make it a cause to try and polarize the community. So we need to be very careful about these things.
If you're going to address previous questions, it has to be within your 90 seconds, just so you guys know.
Yeah, I'll I'll echo Como and Palmer here about my lack of knowledge about the coordinator's issues with the CRG. But again, I would just say that if you are talking to somebody that has a problem with process, you need to figure out what the problem is first. What problem do you have with the CRG? What are your fears? What's going on with it that's not working with you? And then figure out what the process is on the other side and figure out what the disconnect is between the two. So that'd be the way I'd approach a process I didn't know much about.
Can you read the question again? Sure.
What would you say to coordinators who are troubled by the current structure and tone of the CRG?
Well, not knowing much about it, as a couple other people have alluded to, I wouldn't say much. I probably spent a lot of time listening to them to try to figure out exactly where their troubles were. As a board member, that would be something to work with and to go forward with there. As a listening friend, but sometimes all people need to do is be heard. There's not much you can say.
I would probably say to coordinators that have a problem with the current CRG as it exists is that they've been paying attention and that they have read the NAO report. Because it's my understanding, I know this, that half of the elected people to represent resigned, and I've read their letters of resignation. And I also know the NAO report, and the CRG was supposed to be CRGs plural, Coordinator Resource Groups, representing all areas of the fair, and that's not the way it worked out. It worked out into one group that represents some coordinators, and I was told that everybody else currently is known as the unrepresented. So it's not, it obviously isn't doing what NAO suggested that the coordinator research groups do. I would suggest that it needs to go back to the drawing board and start over and be more inclusive.
So as a founding member of the CRG, the misconception that the CRG has done anything other than what the coordinators decided, which was to have one group start this process, is absolute fallacy. That said, to the people that feel not represented, we have, as Steve said, had a lot of curveballs thrown at us in the, 8-9 months that we've existed. Constantly, we were tasked with doing something, we're in the middle of doing something, and then trying to get these meetings for all the coordinators, and, oh, here's something, deal with that. And it's squirrel. So we need to really reassess that, and I am personally distraught that some of the people on the CRG quit. We bent over backwards for them. The 5 of us who are left bent over backwards, and they left, and they said some things that are their versions of reality, and nobody's ever asked for the versions of reality for the people who are still there. And we have a different take on that, and that doesn't mean that theirs is not valid, it's their version. Thank you.
I see the CRG as a response to the transfer of hiring and firing authority of coordinators from the board to a single individual on management with no oversight and no policy to govern it. I think the right way to fix it is to elect some different faces on the board that might do policy before authority so that people feel a little more safe and secure.
What is your understanding of the role of the Board of Directors? Give an example of a situation in which a governing board and an executive director might work together to achieve a goal.
let's start out first, obviously, with the first part, which is the role of the Board of Directors. So I wasn't really understanding of how the Oregon Country Fair Board of Directors functioned when I came onto it, now almost 6 years ago. And what we were being asked to do 6 years ago is different than it is now. And as we look at the overall stability of the organization and looking out, I came in with my campaign as being what's in the best interest of the fair. And I still believe that. To keep the fair legally liability safe, fiduciarily responsibility to the bottom line that we are successful and we are stewards of our monies and our philanthropic efforts. Those are essentially how I look at the organization from a board of directors point of view. To give an example of how we could work together with an executive director is an evolving situation, but I feel it's not much different than the relationships that I experienced with former GMs and our operations director. You set goals and you work forward. I think as we look at our overall strategic is the word, as we're looking at a board strategic plan, working forward, land acquisitions, how to use our infrastructure, how to have the growth from our visioning quest, looking forward as an organization, how we work together. The current one would be working with our executive director on finding a new home for our office and our organization. Oh, I'm done. Thank you.
Let's see. So I own a nonprofit, and obviously I'm on the board of directors of my own nonprofit, and from how we operate with my nonprofit is the board of directors evolves with what the needs are for what we're doing, basically. And it involves everybody that is working with us and everybody that's volunteering with us. And each month we change what our mission is and what our goal is, not the mission, but our agenda based on what next project we're working on. Now, my nonprofit is not at all like the Oregon Country Fair, but I understand the basic role of the board of directors. I've obviously never been on the board of directors for the Country Fair, so that is a new role, but I feel like I am able to do that with good leadership skills and good communication skills. I welcome the idea of a new executive director. From a coordinator standpoint, I am really looking forward to having great communications and having new leadership. To me, that's super important. I felt like we've been lacking that for a number of years, and I can't wait to I just think we, as a board, we have a lot of work to do as far as making sure that we're all on the same page and helping our new executive director work towards huge goals, set the time limit, set the agenda.
The role of the Board of Directors is right here. This is the bylaws of the Oregon Country Fair. And this is what delineate what the Board of Directors are supposed to do in the organization. I want to read the purpose of the fair, because I think that gets a little diluted at times. The purpose of the corporation shall be to sponsor the Oregon Country Fair, hereinafter the fair, which shall be an annual event intended to educate and inform the public about choices in personal and community lifestyle through the promotion and preservation of the work of individual craftspersons, artists, artisans, musicians, and performers. Displays in a traditional fair setting, psycho-spiritual rejuvenation, and the creation of a public forum encouraging the exchange and discussion of ideas about alternative community organization, use of economic resource and appropriate technology, as well as any other lawful purposes within the scope of ditto sections of the Revenue Code. I think the board and the ED can work together on doing a strategic plan, and I really think this is a good example of something that would help bring the fair together. Thank you.
The board has key responsibilities: safety, fiduciary, legal responsibilities they have to adhere to. working collaboratively with an executive director, identify a goal, set steps to achieve that goal, call in the stakeholders who have some greater or lesser expertise in the reactions and the planning of attaining that goal. Keep the lines of communication open and get there.
I think at this point we have some idea of what a board is supposed to do. We are supposed to set policy, and those policies do actually reflect, as Paxton says, our goal, which is transformative. What we end up doing is educating ourselves and the community around us to a large degree. We have enormous opportunities for showing Lane County and the state of Oregon, as well as the rest of the country, things they're simply not familiar with. Now let us consider how we can work together between a board and an executive director. Long, long ago, I was working in a pile of mud, and it occurred to me and Andy Strickland that we wanted a concrete floor on our barn. That went nowhere. It was very much like a Led Zeppelin. I had to talk to management, and management said, we have no idea what to do. So we came up with an idea, largely helped by the Dodeca Center, to move the compost barn to fair property. We talked about it for a long time with management, but guess what? Management does not control policy. As a result, when we came to realize that we really have something here, we need a compost barn. It should be on fair property. We need to go to the board and have someone like Paxton make a motion that says the board supports this policy. When the board supports that policy, we can go back to management, and management says we have a mandate, let's work on it.
Candidates, if you could say your name before you answer your question so the people online that are listening know who it is.
George Braddock. I think the first responsibility of the board, beyond what Paxton read out of the articles, is to act in the best interest of the larger organization at all times. And I spoke in my introduction about what I believe are the duties and responsibilities of the board of directors, and among those are, we carry the weight of the legal responsibility of the organization. We are the liable entity within the fair that is required to act legally and to protect the interest of the fair and to put those interests above ourselves. We're at a stage now where we've got a new executive director in place, and I'm actually part of a 3-person executive committee to assist this executive director in onboarding. So the question of how the board is going to work collaboratively with the executive director, over time, it is the responsibility of the board, to direct the executive director in the directions of the policies of the board and to evaluate them. But at this beginning stage, it's really becoming, familiar with one another, and I think setting goals that will flesh out as we work together on a strategic plan. And I can't overemphasize the importance of that thing happening in the fair as a way of bringing all of these voices together around one common goal.
So I think the role of the board of directors, one of the key roles is to make sure the organization remains focused on its mission. Is it accomplishing its mission? It has the fiduciary responsibility to make sure that does it have the resources and the money to operate? And is it using the resource and money in a wise manner? It has legal responsibilities to make sure that the corporation is acting within the law. And related to that are issues of safety and risk management. I think working with an executive director, I have been an executive director of a nonprofit organization. I think of the board members, I have a unique perspective because I'm currently a board member, and I've been an executive director who's worked with the board of directors. I think the major thing that our current board, two things that I would like to focus on with our current executive director is to have him take the lead on helping the board initiate an inclusive, comprehensive strategic planning process so that it will provide the framework in which operations can make decisions about what it should be doing. And second, that I think it's important that the board work with the executive director to make sure that the clauses in the job description that call for collaborative organizational culture, a participatory management style, and ensuring effective means for the membership to provide input into major operational decisions all happen.
Question, this will probably be the last one. We'll have time for it. Besides my battery's running out of my question.
What are your feelings, or what are your feelings on term limits for board directors?
Palmer Parker, Prince of Darkness, Silver Poodle, Silver Fox, Domino's Delivers. I do not approve of term limits. I believe that you can vote. You vote, that way you decide whether or not someone's going to be in office or not. I will tell you, I've been on the board 7 times. I have always done 1 term at a time and gotten off because I believe there should be turnover and I want it to stay fun for me. On the other hand, I am very glad of the continuity of many people that are on the board and have been on the board for a long time in the past. Term limits reduces an individual's options. I don't understand why you would want to do that.
So, Stephen Berkson, Fire Dick. I'm the one dressed like a hippie. And as far as term limits go, I'm making my claim. As far as term limits go, my personal feeling is in the wider world as opposed to term limits. I think that it actually facilitates special interest money buying politicians and so forth, and it prevents you from keeping someone who is doing a good job, rare as that is in Washington, D.C. Within the fair, I'm not particularly in favor of term limits, but I'm also not opposed to them. And I think what's really important is that an open discussion throughout the family be had and a decision be made about whether or not we want term limits or not, airing all those issues across the membership and find out what the membership wants. And if the membership wants term limits, that's fine for me because I don't plan on doing this for 20 years. So.
Terry Baxter. As was stated in my candidate statement, I'm strongly in favor of term limits. I'd like to see term limits, the exact nature of the term limits. I had some ideas going into things, but I've had conversations with folks, so I could be open to having some latitude on whether it's 2 terms, 3 terms, whatever, something like that. But I also agree with Steve. I mean, I think this is really a membership issue, and so I'd be happy to bring it to the membership and see what the membership thought and then go with that. But personally, I'd be for term limits, and one of the main reasons I'm for them is I think that people can still participate in the fair without being a board of director and move into a mentoring role. So it's really about power. It's not about losing institutional knowledge. It's about personal power. And so I'd like to see some mechanism that would encourage or really enforce us to mentor a new generation of leaders.
Stephen Durkee, I think that term limits in the larger world are a really important thing to avoid the collection of power and the abuse of it. And with the board of directors of the country fair, my personal opinion is that the goal should be to create policies that further our fair for all of us. So really, if somebody's good at making policy, maybe term limits aren't such a great thing. But at the same time, without a limit on the number of times people could be elected, organizations become reliant on single volunteers who are willing to put in a lot of hours and efforts. And having a term limit would provide a reason and a source for new people to come in and bring in fresh ideas, rather than relying on single groups of individuals or the few people willing to put in the effort. And again, all that should be decided by the membership.
Diane Albino. I think elections are term limits for the board of directors. However, when we have a work session, when we finally get around to work sessions, on the NAO, it is a topic that I think that the whole membership can address.
Term limits are a good idea. I'm not sure what they should be, but I don't think that being elected to the board by less than 5% of the fair membership gives you any bona fides or I'm not even sure what the word is. We just need to try and think about how many times somebody's elected to the board. I did take a term off, or a year off. I'm trying to ask for you, my name is Chewy, by the way, in case anybody didn't know that. I'm kind of looking at this as letting people decide how they want the fair to go in terms of governance. And the governance is policies and procedures, and that's what we need to do. Thank you.
John Steinhardt, I think I probably speak for the majority to say that I'm not in favor of term limits for people I like, and I am in favor of term limits for people I don't like. Other than that, I'm really not a big fan of term limits. I understand why people want them. I do think we have an issue when I look around this stage. There's a lot of gray hair here, and we do need to, maybe we need to think about having a board member emeritus role so people can step down, still be involved, and make some room for new people. But we really do need to preserve the institutional knowledge of the fair. Switching gears real quick, since I don't know if we get a closing remark. I'm going to be gone on election night. I have a prior commitment 3,000 miles away. It doesn't mean I'm not running. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm Como once again. I do not necessarily believe that term limits should be a thing. I do believe in democracy. And every single time we come to an election period, it's incumbent upon the membership to do their due diligence and determine if hiring or electing people for yet one more term is the best thing, if you are a person who believes that term limits should be in place. I think overall, one of the big issues that we deal with within our organization, having so many people that have put so many years and so much time and so much passion and heart and love into it, there's a sense of ownership, and it's hard to let go of things that you feel you own. In every single aspect of our organization, we need to reach out to the younger ones and pass the buck, pass the baton. Bring them under the wing, teach them how to do the job, and give them a shot and give them a chance. We need new ideas, we need new input, especially generationally. We live in a completely different time than we did 50 years ago. And younger folk have a different perspective. Term limits, a little restrictive. If you have a great leader, why would you ever want to be put in a position where you're forced to not choose that great leader to keep leading you? It all comes down to the ballot box and your vote. If you feel like term limits are something that should be in place, vote the way you need to vote.
So I'll just remain seated for a minute. Catherine, that was it for the questions. Catherine would like to do some closing comments. Thank you all.
Okay, so I am going to make quickly before I say thank you, the suggestion has been made that each candidate that's here state their name out loud so that the people watching remotely, use a microphone please, state your name and then we'll wrap this up shortly. Yes?
If you could just stand up so people can see what you're
You got to stand up and everything. Diana Vito.
George Braddock.
John Chewy Burgess.
John Silvermoon.
John Steinhardt.
Justin Honey.
Como Gustafson, I'd be honored to serve you.
Stephen Durkee.
Lisa Cooley.
It's a relief to stand up. I hope your chairs are more comfortable, Palmer Parker.
Oh, Paxton Hogue.
Stephen Fire Dick Berkson.
Sue Theolis.
Terry Baxter.
Tom Barr.
Please join me in thanking all of these people. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I just have a couple quick comments. First of all, thank you again for being so crowded up on that stage and answering the questions that are fired at you. Thank you to the audience. I want to ask that if anybody has any feedback on the format that we used tonight, some of which worked and some of which may have been a little shaky, you could email sign, is it sign@ocfmagic.com. That doesn't mean you're signing, or sign at ocfmagic.org. Doesn't mean you're signing our platform, but we would like to hear from you. The second, more important point I want to make is that there's another candidates forum, town hall on October 6th here at 5 p.m. Hang on to your questions and please let these brave folks hear from you before then. Thank you so much.